President Jacques Chirac, Madame Chirac, President Weira Weike Freiberger, former Prime Minister Raffarin, Mr. Stéphane Martin, my good friend Dr. Ismail Serageldin, laureates of this remarkable award from the Chirac Foundation, distinguished dignitaries on this stage, excellencies, members of the media, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I'm deeply honored to be here, and I'm very grateful for this opportunity in such an august gathering and on an occasion which I think clearly highlights the importance of preventing conflict rather than dealing with it once it has broken out. And in that sense, this is very similar to preventing damage and destruction of the environment. Prevention is certainly better than mitigation. When I had the honor of accepting the Nobel Peace Prize on behalf of the IPCC, GIEC, I used a Sanskrit term which has been handed down to us over thousands of years. And that term is Vasudev Kutumbakam, which means that the universe is one family. And if the universe is one family, then just as we prevent any conflict in our homes, we should also be concerned about preventing conflict in any part of the globe. And that is where I'd like to salute President Chirac and his foundation for having taken the initiative in instituting this award, which I think has profound implications for human civilization and the maintenance of peace. President Chirac also talked about the importance of development. And the reality is that we have tension, we have stresses all over the world. And unfortunately, these stresses will be exacerbated by climate change. And therefore, I think we have to be concerned about preventing, as the Framework Convention on Climate Change clearly brings out, dangerous anthropogenic interference with the climate system. I shall use some findings of the fourth assessment report of the IPCC, of GIEC, to highlight the link between climate change and the need for ensuring peace and the prevention of conflict across the globe. We came up with the finding that warming of the climate system is unequivocal. In other words, this is an issue which is no longer in doubt. The climate of this earth is changing, and it's changing in a wide range of ways which we have clearly elaborated. We also found that most of the observed increase in global average temperature since the mid-20th century is very likely due to the observed increase in anthropogenic greenhouse gas concentrations. And when we use the term very likely, we are assigning a probability of over 90% to this statement. And that, I think, is something which we have to take very seriously. That if human society is causing this climate change, then we must do what is required to prevent it and to deal with this challenge effectively. How is climate change being manifested? Well, firstly, it is affecting ecosystems across the planet. There is greater evidence of flooding, droughts, wildfires, an increase in insects, some types of insects, ocean acidification, and we also carried out an assessment of a large number of plant and animal species, and we found that 20 to 30% of these species were at the risk of extinction if temperatures were to exceed 1.5 to 2.5 degrees Celsius. We also found that food security could be compromised. particularly in the lower latitudes, in seasonally dry and tropical areas, crop productivity was projected to decline, even with temperature increases of 1 to 2 degrees Celsius. And these, may I emphasize, are some of the poorest regions of the world. As President Chirac reminded us about sub-Saharan Africa, this is a region where a large number of people are dependent on rain-fed agriculture. And with climate change, their lives and livelihoods will be affected very seriously. I also want to highlight the particular vulnerability of coastal regions in the world, which are already suffering from excessive flooding. And the worst affected and the most vulnerable of these are the mega deltas in Asia and Africa. These are cities like Shanghai, Dhaka, Kolkata, which have a large concentration of population and a large concentration of property and assets, which every time there is a storm surge, every time there is coastal flooding, will affect a large number of people and the very economic existence of these communities. So we have to be concerned about this. And of much greater concern, in my view, relates to the small island states. You just have to go to the Maldives Islands, a nation of over 1,000 islands, where some islands are already being evacuated. And most of these islands are barely a meter or 2 meters above sea level. So every time there is a storm surge, clearly it has a major impact on the residents of these places. I recall the IPCC GIEC held its plenary session in the Maldives in 1997, and the then President Gayoom told us while he addressed us, "Ladies and gentlemen, the place where you are holding your session today, just a few years ago was under about 1.5 feet of water because of a very normal weather event, but with a higher sea level. And the sea level in the 20th century rose by 17 centimeters on the average. Clearly, the impact on a small island state like the Maldives can be absolutely critical. I also want to highlight the impacts on human health and on water. In Africa, for instance, we have estimated that as early as 2020, 75 to 250 million people will be living in a state of water stress. Now, this is a continent where you already have a serious problem with water availability. And with climate change, these stresses get exacerbated further. I'd like to highlight the fact that if you look at the Mediterranean region and the southern part of Europe, that's also very vulnerable to increased water stress. And this is now becoming a source of great concern. May I emphasize the fact that a number of extreme events are also on the increase, and this is based on observations that we already have around the world. Now, I'm highlighting all this because, as has been brought out very eloquently by President Chirac, these are issues that obviously will result in conflict. And therefore, if we want to prevent conflict related to the impacts of climate change, we have to deal with the issue of climate change on a global basis. I'm afraid our record so far has been less than inspiring. And I want to mention the fact that between 1970 and 2004, the increase in emissions of greenhouse gases was about 70%. That does not do us any credit as a society. I also want to mention that the concentration levels that we have in the atmosphere of carbon dioxide and methane are well above normal levels that have existed for 650,000 years. So therefore, what we are doing in a very short span of time clearly goes against the trends that have maintained a reasonably stable climate for a long period of time. Now, taking action is not expensive. we really need to look at some of the core benefits from mitigation measures. If we were to reduce our emissions of greenhouse gases, the core benefits include lower levels of air pollution at the local level, much higher energy security across the world, much higher levels of employment, much higher levels of agricultural productivity, which otherwise would suffer. And therefore, it is logical for us to move in a direction that would bring about a stabilization of the Earth's climate. I would like to end by highlighting what Gandhiji told us during his lifetime. And he made a generalization. He says that a technological society has two choices. Either we can ignore the impending catastrophe that we are going to face in the future and live in a state of ignorance, neglect, or self-deception, or we have a second choice, that we are aware of what is going to happen, and in anticipation of forthcoming catastrophe, we overcome self-deception and take every step to prevent the problem that's going to arise and the catastrophes that we are going to face in the future. I hope human society, and certainly inspired by the work of the Chirac Foundation, has the wisdom to heed Gandhiji's advice. We did not heed it during his lifetime, but now I think it has much greater relevance than ever before. So in the end, I'd like to thank President Chirac, and once again, may I salute you, sir. You have been one of the greatest statesmen that the world has had in periods when you showed the courage to take a stand on issues that would be to the benefit of society. And I'm really pleased and privileged to be here on this occasion. And may I express the hope and pray that you will continue with the good work in your foundation, which would have profound benefits for generations to come. Thank you very much.
Invité d'honneur du jury cette année, le prix Nobel de la paix, Monsieur Rajendra Pachauri.